Hi, my name is Paul Skeith, and I'm a business lawyer practicing in Austin, Texas. Many business owners and business lawyers have been following developments about the Corporate Transparency Act very closely over this last year. In a significant move, the U.S. Department of Treasury recently announced an interim final rule that impacts the Corporate Transparency Act, or CTA. This update is crucial for domestic entities to understand as it changes the reporting requirements for beneficial ownership information, or BOI. Let's explore what this means for U.S. businesses. The Corporate Transparency Act was established to enhance transparency in corporate structures. It required entities to report BOI to the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, or FinCEN. The goal was to combat money laundering and other illicit activities by making corporate ownership more transparent. On March 21st, 2025, the Treasury Department introduced an interim final rule that fundamentally alters the scope of the CTA. This rule removes the requirement for U.S. companies and U.S. persons to report beneficial ownership information to FinCEN. So, what does this mean for domestic entities? Essentially, the interim final rule exempts all entities created in the United States from BOI reporting requirements. This includes those previously known as, quote, domestic reporting companies, end quote. So, in other words, domestic entities can now do nothing, as domestic entities are no longer required to report their beneficial ownership information to FinCEN. It's important to note that foreign entities registered to do business in the U.S. are still required to report beneficial ownership information under the new deadlines set by FinCEN. This shift focuses the reporting requirements solely on foreign entities. FinCEN is accepting comments on the interim rule for 60 days after publication of the rule in the Federal Register and will assess the exemptions in light of the feedback received. FinCEN intends to issue a final rule later in 2025. For domestic entities, while not being required to make an additional filing is of course a very welcome development and a relief to many, the interim regulation that accomplishes this seems to almost directly contradict the express intent of the Corporate Transparency Act itself as enacted by Congress. Because of this, businesses will need to continue to pay attention to FinCEN's final rule on this issue, congressional attempts to amend the Corporate Transparency Act itself, and court challenges to FinCEN's final rule. Business owners have not heard the last of this one yet, I'm afraid.